And I think the fundamentals haven't changed. You still need top of mind awareness. You still need like and trust within your brand. The mediums have, though, right? And the way that the marketplace is fragmented has, though. And then the question becomes, how do you address those? And how do you make sure that you're getting that attention for the brand? And part of that is just change. And change happens, and you have to adapt. We're not using IBM's electric typewriters anymore. And most people listening to this podcast might even not know what that is. The web, you can grab anything and hear any story you want to hear. And then at some level, the algorithms take over and they tell you the story you think you want to hear. And he goes, we're depersonalizing the importance of telling that person how important they are to you. But I think Marshall McLuhan's The Medium is a message that's what it's all about. It's wherever you show up, how you show up matters. And I think that still holds true today. And the best brands still do it.
Welcome to Future Fuzz, the digital marketing podcast.
So Rob Rankin, president at Clarity Coverdale Fury, thank you so much for joining me on the Future Fuzz podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
What's the best thing that's happened to you this week?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I would have said the weather because we hit 40s in the early part of the week, but now that we're kind of at the tail end and we're back into single digits, I don't know that I can claim that. But I think the best thing was actually last weekend. My wife and I headed to Madison, visit our daughter who is a artist there. And she had her very first gallery showing. So she had a piece in the showing. So it was one of those proud parent moments. And it was and it was a lot of fun. And it was a lot of fun too.
It's funny that now that I've been in Minnesota for going on 6-7 years, people have different kind of ranges in terms of what's cold. They're like, oh, it's like 20 degrees and it's cold. And I'm like, it's going to be -3 next week. So.
Well, yeah. I've been here since 1980, and even for me, -3 is cold.
It is cold. Yeah, it's next level, like don't go outside cold. So.
And that's because it is.
Yeah. So for folks that may not be familiar with CCF, how would you describe the kind of work you do?
Yeah, we're a creative communications agency and we're full service. So we do media buying and planning, strategic development, and then creative development. We've tended to focus a lot in healthcare. Probably 60% of our book is in healthcare. But what we really do is we leverage the power of emotion. So we find that emotional catalyst between your brand and your audience, and we leverage that in communications.
And as president, where are you spending most of your time?
My job is to hire good people and stay out of their way as best I can, which I have to admit is challenging at times.
Yeah.
But really just checking in on the teams and checking in on our clients, making sure everything's going okay. Less day-to-day work than certainly I would love. It's what I grew up doing and still love doing.
Yeah.
But more just being sure that my team has the tools and that the clients are getting exactly what they're looking for.
And how big is that team now?
No, we're 20 folks. And then a bench of probably 12 to 15 that we use on a regular basis.
So at your level, what are signals to know whether things are on track or not for you?
Yeah, good question. So there's just the administrative part. Are the projections looking good? How is utilization going? And things like that. But as importantly, it's checking in with the teams and checking in with clients to be sure that we're delivering on all cylinders. And again, most importantly with clients, are there any red flags? Are we meeting our deadlines and things of that nature?
And what type of clients do you primarily work with?
Primarily healthcare. It's nothing that was planned. It was more organic. But I bet 60% of our book is in healthcare, something we refer to as healthcare from all angles. So think of payer, provider, public health, and then manufacturer. Yeah. So from United Health Group to Medtronic to Minnesota Department of Health to hospital systems that are the actual providers. We've got a lot of experience and have clients in each of those areas.
So what's interesting about the approach you take, I feel there's a lot of emotional relevance and weight to the messaging you carry. And you talk a lot about this idea. We've had a pre-call as well, and we talked about this idea of creative communications that demand attention. Why is that something that resonates with the messaging you're trying to put out there?
Yeah, so I think when you can connect emotionally with someone, you tell them you get them, you understand them. And that can happen in a lot of different ways. If you're a smoker trying to quit, and some of the work that we've done in the past and currently do for the Department of Health, giving them that empathy and that compassion, but also holding them accountable because it's not an easy task. And so sometimes you use what are referred to as negative emoters to challenge them. But
Mm.
other times you kind of open your arms and say, I get it. It's not easy. It's hard. But once you can make that connection where they say, they get me, and we've done this for Belvedere vodka. We've done it for the YMCA. We've done it for Red Gold canned tomatoes. It works across categories. We just happen to be doing a lot today in financial services and healthcare. But when you can find that emotional catalyst in that driver, it again tells that audience that you understand them. And then your likelihood to develop like and trust goes up significantly.
Yeah. It feels like something that brands have lost touch with, this idea of presence.
I think so. And I think so. Today's market is so fragmented. If you think
Yeah.
of when you and I grew up, there were three channels in PBS, right?
Yeah.
And then there
And you
was,
actually had to get up to change. If you go back far enough, you had to get up to change the channel too.
right? Yeah, that's exactly right. But today, everything is so fragmented and audiences are scattered.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it was Mark Andreessen talked about the long tail. Well, the long tail is here and we're living it, right?
Yeah.
And so because those things are so fragmented, the opportunity to have a captive audience is harder. And when you can, with shows like, I'll just pick on Yellowstone because it's,
Mm.
recent and people get that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Often that's commercial free.
Yeah.
And so not all of the OTT is, and then the programming is as commercial free, but a lot of it is. And so when you have it, it's more difficult to get a captive audience. Better Homes and Gardens just isn't around at the same level it once was, if it's
Yeah.
around at all. Whereas you used to be able to weather magazine or television or radio, get a significant chunk of a demographic and be able to communicate to them. That's not available today, at least
Mm.
not as it once was.
And so, how do you think about that as an agency to differentiate yourselves? Because a lot of what's out there in the digital marketing space is cookie cutter, and people are just literally scrolling past stuff so fast nowadays, you know, because it's not resonating or it's not landing for them.
Yeah. So we like to say, or I like to say, how are we throwing a big rock? You think of you can throw a pebble in the ocean and it doesn't do anything. You can throw a big rock in a small pond and you see the ripples, right?
Yeah.
But how are you throwing that big rock? And then the question becomes, all right, so what are the tactics we need to do that? And it can vary. It might be during the beginning of your campaign, you increase frequency. So
Hmm.
your communications don't change, the creative doesn't change, but the intensity at which they see it does. And
Hmm.
then you taper it off because those things often from a financial standpoint aren't sustainable to do during the duration of time, during the full duration of a campaign. And then you would go into more maintenance mode. Or you can do it creatively. Historically, we've done what we call spectacular boards and out of home,
Hmm.
where you drive by them and you can't ignore them. You don't have to do a lot in a market to get attention,
Yeah.
but you get attention because of what you're doing. And others have done that well in using out of home. I've seen others do it with using experiential marketing.
Hmm.
Back in the day, which is probably about 7 to 10 years ago, flash mobs were a thing. Well,
Yeah.
flash mobs aren't a thing anymore, but they are a way where you demand attention.
Yeah.
And it's not to say, and then the question becomes, how do you capture that event? There was a great campaign a while back from Coca-Cola where they took over a vending machine at a college or university in Atlanta. And you would order a Coke, and out of a hand would pop out and hand you a submarine sandwich. And then you would order a Coke, and the next person would get an entire pizza.
That's
Well,
funny.
the great part about the campaign wasn't just that one place where they did that tactic. It was that then they took that tactic and the video of it and they broadcast it out
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
social, right? So while the intensity, if you were sitting in that cafeteria space or that common area space at that university was, what the heck is going on over there? Pretty intense, from a playful kind of way. But then to be able to be smart enough to broadcast it beyond that and still capture that fun and the emotion of how cheeky that particular tactic was.
It's almost like a hybrid approach, using the out of home for the experiential resonance. But then obviously if a tree falls in the forest and, and no one's there, it doesn't make any sound, right? So,
Right. That's exactly right.
using that combination
Yeah.
to get it in front of a bigger audience.
Yeah, and I think the challenge today too is if you lean on only digital or a traditional campaign, to your point earlier, people just scroll past so fast. right? Especially on their phones or on their tablets. Now, if you're watching TV and there's, interruptible TV where there's programming that drops in, you see it. But again, that captive audience, it's so much of it is one-to-one versus one-to-many. And that makes a difference.
Yeah. I was in corporate for 20 plus years, so we actually had a water cooler. So we would talk about things on Monday, but now it's like we're remote, and I'm more of an entrepreneur now, so I don't have that in office camaraderie. But what do you think is replacing, or how do you replace water cooler moments now?
Well, I think they still happen, right? But they might not happen in the office like you and I grew up with. So the place I see it most are with television shows or with shows, right?
Yeah.
We sit around, we're hybrid, we're in 2 days a week. And when people get together, it's like, what are you watching? And people talk about that. I talked about the Last Frontier my wife and I just finished, and certainly Pluribus over the last year has been a hit show.
Yeah.
Hijacked was a couple of years ago, and there are dozens and dozens of others. But that seems to be the water cooler topic of the day, where it's like, what shows are you watching? But less hey, the Super Bowl commercial I liked because we're all back in the office on Monday.
Yeah.
And the big game was yesterday.
Yeah, and you have to be careful nowadays with these limited series episodes, or the ones that have Pluribus was actually old school. That every week you'd have to wait for the next episode.
Yeah.
But we tried to wait as long as we could with my partner, but at some point we got started on it. But you have to be careful not to get on Twitter or Instagram, because they'll like reveal the plot line or a crazy twist that you don't want to see just yet.
I'm guilty of that. Just a few weeks ago here in the office, I was talking to someone about a show, and two of us had seen it, and someone didn't, but we didn't know they hadn't. And I leaked out a tease, and they just looked at me and said, "Thank you."
So it sounds like presence first, performance second, as far as like the go-to-market strategy. Does that encapsulate it?
They're not mutually exclusive.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I got into a debate on LinkedIn with a colleague here in the Twin Cities who I think very, very highly of. He was talking about how you have to have values connections, and I agree. But he was, at least in his post initially, he was saying that demanding attention isn't worth anything because it fades. And he's right there, but I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's the combination of them both. So absent of something that's going to garner attention, you're not going to be able to deliver that values or that emotional connection. And so you need them both. And then the question becomes, once you've delivered that kind of big impact idea that pulls people in, how do you sustain that momentum? And often it's like a bell curve where you go up and you go down. And then the question becomes, at what point in time do you need more energy or dollars in the marketplace to drive up that awareness again, so that you're building like and trust over time?
Is it part of what you're tasked with for folks that come in that are strictly maybe old school marketing trained, that you have to, it's a shift in perception and in explaining, what this performance, like what this experience first marketing looks like to them?
That's a good question. I'll answer that telling you that I was classically trained. I grew up at BBDO and spent the first 8 years of my career there working on Hormel Foods and looking at IRI data and having the folks from Nielsen come in and share all that data and learning just the consumer packaged goods marketing way to go, both from a BBDO side, but then also from Hormel Foods. And I think the fundamentals haven't changed. You still need top of mind awareness. You still need like and trust within your brand. Mm-hmm. The mediums have, though, right? And the way that the marketplace is fragmented has, though. And then the question becomes, how do you address those? And how do you make sure that you're getting that attention for the brand? And part of that is just change. And change happens, and you have to adapt. We're not using IBM Selectric typewriters anymore. And most people listening to this podcast might even not know what that is.
Yeah.
But we went through, Web 1.0, Web 2.0. We've headed in, we've done digital marketing. We've been doing that for a while. We're heading into AI, which is a whole new landscape.
Yeah.
But the fundamentals of marketing won't change, and the fundamentals of change won't change. You will have to find ways to adapt. You'll have to go through a change management process to be sure you're baking those things into your systems, or you'll get left behind.
Yeah. Well, thanks for teeing that up for me. AI is actually, forcing people to make a lot of decisions on the fly really quickly. How is it affecting you day to day in your business?
Yeah, so last year our strategy was dabble. And we said, all right, here's the
Okay.
deal. In 2025, we want you to go in and we want you to play.
Okay.
We have tools you can use, resources you can use, but we want you to get experience using it. Next year, we'll figure out how do we put it in what we refer to as the front of the house and the back of the house, so more like a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
We look at the front of the house being things that are more consumer facing, things that might be more client facing, tools we may brand and then share with others. And back of the house is more administrative. How are we cleaning up processes, allowing AI to do things that were otherwise human driven that can now be done automatically? Not that there won't ever be a human in the loop. I think there will always be that and need to have that.
Yeah.
But how are we doing that? So I think, it's again, it's change. It's not going to go away. You can ignore it and you'll be left behind, or you
Sure.
can find ways to adapt. So we're taking a bit of a stepped approach again with dabbling last year, but this year finding more focused areas that become baked into our systems and our processes.
Do you think, Rob, that it'll eventually make its way into all parts of the agency, or are there things that you will not let anywhere near AI?
I think it'll touch everything. The
Yeah.
question is how much.
Yeah.
So you can have AI develop creative concepts for you.
Hmm.
And I know last year when we dabbled, we had a writer who did it to get rid of all the crappy ideas because they would come, the AI would come back with all the expected things that you would do.
Yeah.
Well, the tools are different now, and they're starting to be able to sense emotion and do things
Mm.
like that. And I've seen some things that we've done and things that other shops have done where they've leveraged the tool. For example, there was an addiction campaign out of Kansas City, I believe. Agency down there took a gentleman who had passed from an overdose, and they were able to mimic his voice so that it was
Mm.
if he was presenting to you saying, "Hey, this is a mistake I made. You don't want to make this mistake too."
Wow.
Really, really powerful stuff.
Wow.
But they were able to take an image of him and a recording of his voice and be able to mimic if it was as if it was him. And it was just super. I mean, talk about a negative emoter. It was hard stuff, but it
Wow.
was really, really good work.
And so is part of the challenge as the leadership team to encourage or build a different type of skill set? Like, yeah, I remember when I first experienced ChatGPT, my first thought was, we're going to have to learn how to talk to robots. Like that's going to be the most important skill
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
and that translates into prompts and stuff like that. But it feels like, and I'm now dabbling in Claude Code and building apps, like so I've gone down that rabbit hole, and I'm like, whoa, like if you just know what to say, how to say it, how to speak in their language to get the desired output. I think it's interesting. Like we're having to develop this whole new language and skill.
Yeah, I think I heard a quote or read a quote a couple weeks ago. AI is not going to displace you. The person that knows AI better than you will.
Mm.
And I think that's telling. It's incumbent upon all of us to learn it well enough to be able to speak to it
Yeah.
and to be able to practice within it, within whatever area or discipline you're within. I think there will be specialists. There
Hmm.
already are. Um, there'll be folks that come in and are experts in change management.
Yeah.
That over the next 3 to 5 years, the opportunity is there as a consultant to come in and do change management, either on the agency side or corporate side, massive.
Mm.
And they're just telling you what to do, right? They're laying structure, they're killing old processes and inventing new ones or developing new ones.
Yeah.
So I do think there will be specific disciplines that are AI focused, but everyone will all have to have some wherewithal in using the tools.
Future Fuzz is sponsored by SalesSource, B2B pipeline management and sales growth for your business.
What do you track, or is there newsletters you read? How do you keep up with what's happening? Because that can get overwhelming too, because then everyone seems to be an AI expert nowadays.
Yeah, it's a little different for each of us, and I think with the web. You can grab anything and hear any story you want to hear.
Yeah.
And then at some level, the algorithms take over and they tell you the story you think you want to hear.
Yeah.
But we lean a lot on our association, the 4As, the American Association of Advertising Agencies.
Okay.
They do a fantastic job of leading in that space, and really in all spaces. Their job is to protect us and help us develop. And so they're consistently doing certifications, online conferences, webinars, discussion forums, things like that, where people can learn from each other. And that's where we as a shop lean probably the most. And then it gets a bit more ad hoc. We have some people internally that are just passionate about it,
Yeah.
and we look at them as thought leaders. We have a small team of 3 people that do just that, and it's their job to bring things to the team. And so that's how we do that. Now, again, you've got the web, and now you have AI as search that you can use. So the world is your oyster of information.
Yeah.
But I think being able to prioritize things and limiting it at some level, or having some go-to resources, can be helpful so you don't overwhelm yourself.
And it sounds like you're encouraging the team members who have a proclivity for it or are excited about it to get the other rest of the team excited as well, and do some lunch and learns or things of that nature, I imagine.
We are. We have
Yeah.
a monthly meeting we do as a shop, and the folks on that team have been bringing something forth every month as something new, something they've done. And as we move on through the year, it won't be them. We'll be asking team members to say, "All right, what did you do this month?
Yeah.
Show us a use case and show us why you did it. Did it work? And it's okay if it didn't work,
Hmm.
but what did you do? Why did you do it? Did it work? Did it not work? What would you do differently?" Just a little show and tell.
Shifting back to your role as the leadership role, I imagine you're wearing many different hats any given time of the day or any given time of the week. But what's a tough question you've had to ask yourself recently?
Oh, wow. You really throw me a curveball there. We didn't talk about that one in our pre-talk. For me, it's how deep do I get in?
Okay.
I want to get in deep. I
Yeah.
am a account guy and strategist at heart. I love when I have client interaction strategically,
Yeah.
but that's not my role anymore. So I've got to be able to just delegate those things,
Yeah.
and being disciplined enough to not needle in folks' business, but still be aware.
Yeah.
And just to be sure I'm not telling them how to do their jobs.
That's
I
important.
grew up I grew up a certain way when myself and a couple others took over the shop just over a decade ago now. One of the partners that sold it to us, I said, I want to do things just like you guys did. And he said, no, you have to do things like you
Mm.
would do them.
Mm.
And I was dumbfounded by the advice, but I really was. I was like,
Yeah.
it took me a while to really have that soak in, because they had done such a fantastic job over such a long period of time. And I admired them all so much. And I had learned so much from them. I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of mimic or mirror those behaviors. But he was right. The new team needed to do things our way. That doesn't mean we uproot everything.
Yeah.
But it had to fulfill the vision that we had. And he was, and again, it took me a couple months at least to really soak that thought in,
Yeah.
because I wasn't expecting it. But he was right. He was spot on.
Yeah, it's not like here's the playbook, do what I
No,
did. But that's great guidance because it allowed you to infuse your own like your way of doing things and
hmm
probably with like the DNA of the original founders, but then now applying it,
yeah.
and I'm sure now the company's got your imprint on it as well.
Yeah. And some of those things, we do hold true to. So I
Yeah.
think, well, you and I talked before, but when we first had the emotional catalyst, it was actually called the emotional touchstone.
Hmm.
And that was here at the shop before I walked in the door in 1998. We rebranded it a connector probably in 2007, 2008, just to contemporize it a little bit.
Hmm.
And then more recently, probably 3 years ago, we rebranded it again. So, but the functional value of it and what it does is identical.
Yeah.
We've just allowed it to evolve a little bit and rename it a couple times, and put a little bit of logo design and artwork and a little bit of a different story around it. But fundamentally, it's about the power of emotion and leveraging that in communications.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think it's a powerful mechanism or tool, and I think just diving a little bit deeper would be helpful.
Yeah, so it sounds cliche, and if I'm honest with myself, it is. But people think with their heads and they buy with their hearts.
Yeah.
There's also the adage that people don't remember facts, they remember stories. You know, when you think of the creative development, the Lee Clowes of the world and Burn Box, you know, they would tell you people remember stories.
Yeah.
And the fact is, they do retain stories, right? Just like you retain, it's easier to retain lyrics to a song than it is a mathematical formula, at least for some of us, right? And so I think that that same logic is true. That if you can connect with someone emotionally, what you're telling them is, "I understand what you're going through,"
Hmm.
or "I understand how you feel,"
Yeah.
or "I understand what's important to you." It was interesting just this past week. We haven't worked with Red Gold Canned Tomatoes for 5 years. And for whatever reason, I saw a social post. I went to their website and I poked around. And here they are 10 years later using the positioning of grown by families, made by families, because the Reichert family who owns it has been doing this since 1942. But they have probably 25 growers in the western Ohio and northeastern Indiana area that they basically do work. They do deals on a handshake, not
Okay.
literally, but it's the same families, generation
Yeah.
after generation. And when we talked to moms about that, soccer moms about that 12 years ago, 11 years ago, they said that's important. It's not that it's a family-owned company. It's that you know those families and that there are families just like mine that are growers that are growing that food. That's important versus corporate.
Yeah.
And we developed a positioning that was based on that, you know, family connection. And here they are still. We haven't worked with them in 5 years, and 11 years later, the positioning has still stood the test of time.
That speaks very highly of the effect or the impact it had.
Yeah, it's one of
Yeah.
those things where you look back at your book and the work you do, and
Yeah.
there are a couple of them like that they just put a smile on your face.
So switching from looking back to looking forward, we talked a lot about your planning process and how you think in like 18-month horizons. I'm curious, when you think about long-term planning, how do you successfully do that without losing like the day-to-day execution?
Yeah, really, really good question. So years ago, I had a client ask us, you know, for their brand, you know, what does great look like in 5 years? And that was
Hmm.
kind of his. We're going to put a stake in the ground. What do we need to do?
Hmm.
I shortened that to 3 years just because 5 years is a long time,
Yeah.
especially in today's world.
Yeah.
But then what you do is you then kind of work backwards. So you say, all right, what does great look like in 18 months? And we use EOS, so the Entrepreneur's Operating System, which breaks things down to quarter by quarter by quarter.
Yeah.
And you do that annually. You do annual planning. You remain flexible because things change, but we set goals annually in late the year before. And then we establish what are referred to as our rocks or our tasks we need to accomplish a goal each quarter. And so we break it down, or we what I like to refer to as chunk it down. Years
Hmm.
ago, a friend of mine turned me on to Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principle, and the one principle of the 23 that he had that stuck was principle 8, and it's chunk it down.
Okay.
And so it's a way that when you feel overwhelmed, whether it's just one big task or a laundry list that's gotten too long,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you say, okay, what's most important? What do I need to do today? And then you get through today, and then you say, what do I need to do tomorrow? And by chunking it down, you manage the emotion around it,
Hmm.
but you also increase the focus on what you're doing, which increases the value in what you're providing, or you elevate the work because you're not as scattered and you're not as afraid because you're not feeling that anxiety from that long list.
And what signals do you look for to see if you're drifting?
Personally, I have a weekly to do and a nightly to do.
Okay.
And I just check in on those things. And if there's something that's been hanging there too long, then it's like, all right, I got to stay a couple hours later. I got to come in on a Saturday, or now in today's world, I go to a coffee shop as opposed to hanging out at my house
Yeah.
on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And then for the team as well. So we get together every 2 weeks as a leadership team, and we've got rocks. It's just a simple Excel sheet, and we look at it. And if something drifts for too long and someone isn't taking care of a task and we're 3 weeks past its deadline,
Hmm.
we respectfully call them out on it and say, hey, what's going on? Do you need
Yeah.
help? Are you overwhelmed? Is this just not your bailiwick and you're not going to get it done? Let's be honest about that. Do we need to
Hmm.
transfer the responsibility?
Yeah.
But we hold ourselves accountable to that.
It sounds like this concept of stressing the importance of presence for brands
Hmm.
has now translated into the leadership team, like, being present in the work that you're doing with your
Yeah.
clients.
I think that's fair. I think with our clients, what they like most about us is that we're grounded,
Okay. That's,
um, and we're honest with them.
yeah.
If we don't have the solution, we talk about that. We talk through that. We give them a point of view, but it's not ivory tower. We don't tell them what to do. We say, here's what we think is best and why.
Hmm.
And if they disagree, then we have a dialogue about that. Um, but being sure that and this is a different kind of presence, that you're present there for them in the moment. You're not searching your phone. You're not checking email while you're on a Zoom call with them. You're focused,
Yeah.
and you're giving them your full attention. And people feel that. I mean, you can always tell if you're on a webinar, a Zoom call, and someone's eyes are drifting. It's like, all right, they're not. And it's an easy tell.
Yeah. Nowadays it is.
Like I want to play poker with those folks, even though I don't even play poker.
Yeah. Yeah. They got a very obvious tell.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like you've done so much work to adapt to this new environment with AI and all the changes in technology happening, but not losing sight of like the human element, which is
Yeah.
incredibly important. And I think that's probably why you're having such success with clients.
No, I was just going to say, some things never change, right? At
Yeah.
the end of the day, we're still people,
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
humans. And it's important to treat each other as such.
Any prognostications for the future of marketing? Just kind of putting you on the spot here, but I'm curious, like things move so fast, and I don't know that there's topics we've talked about today that a year ago, didn't even exist or were in their
Yeah.
infancy. So is there anything you're seeing or trending or tracking that's like,
Yeah.
very future oriented?
My fear is that we're going to lose that emotional connection,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
fewer and fewer, and we're already seeing this, fewer and fewer are paying attention to that and realizing its importance. It's really interesting. I think Salesforce changed so much of the way we go about marketing, where now people are dumping things into Salesforce and they're waiting for a CRM to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
But it's true. How many
Yeah.
times have you gotten a LinkedIn message from someone? You responded to the message, but you never got a response, right? You got a salesperson who
Yeah.
contacted you when you went, all right, I'm going to bite. I'm going to contact this person back.
Yeah.
Type away. And then you get ghosted by the person that's trying to sell you something.
Yeah. That's crazy.
I have to believe, and I do believe, that that's Salesforce. Someone's using a CRM, they're not paying attention, and they're not responding. They're missing the opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a tell. It's like, all right, done, delete. And so I worry, even with AI, that we'll become so automated that we'll
Hmm.
lose that emotional, personal touch. And I think the brands that can figure out a way to leverage the technology, just like we did the web, but still maintain that relationship with their audience that feels like a relationship.
Hmm.
Jeep has their camps where they invite Jeep owners to go, hobnobbing on hills for a couple
Yeah.
weeks, days, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what the Jeep Wrangler thing is with the ducks in the window, but
That's
but it's
it's a
it's
thing.
but it's but it's a thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if that was Jeep invented or kind of more cult, grassroots, bottom up invented,
Yeah.
but it's a thing, and it's a thing that binds Jeep owners to Jeep owners.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The shame of it is I now see other people putting ducks in their windows, and I'm like, oh, the poor Jeep guys, someone's entrenched on their turf and they can't do anything about it,
They should have picked another animal or another.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So as we come to a close, Rob, I'm just curious on the personal side. Have you always had a passion for marketing? Because I know you had your early career in BBDO, but like, is this something that's always been like something you've been really interested in?
Yeah, absolutely not. So, if I'm really honest with you, and I will be, I was the kid that went to college to grow up. I was the kid that went to college because it's what all my buddies did, and it was what we were supposed to do next, right?
Mm,
And thankfully, I did grow up at least a little bit in college.
yeah.
But I walked out and I had no idea what to do. My dad was like, "You should be a sales guy." So all my buddies were doing copier sales at the time because that was the easy path. And
Yeah.
and today they're doing great in sales because they had a start there. I happened to work in a radio booth from a Minnesota Golden Gopher football game with the
Okay.
color guy. The color guy was my dad and the play-by-play guy, and my job was to cue up the commercials with the station.
Okay.
And I just said to my dad, I said, "Wow, that feels interesting." And before I knew it, he set me up with two interviews. One was at Fallon, and another was with a guy that owned a design company called Pedersen Gask here in Minneapolis. And Brian Muldoon taught me everything about advertising. He said, "Here's the
Mm,
books you should read, and here's all about it." And then Irv Fish, who's one of the founders of Fallon and their CFO for a long, long time, he told me I wasn't ready yet.
mm,
But I tell you, when I walked in for that interview and I saw the Porsche in the lobby and I looked at it, something inside said, "This is what's for me."
yeah.
And then I just started chasing it. I took Brian's advice and read as much as I could, digested it. I interviewed like crazy. I took job as a traffic intern back when traffic was actually a thing
Hmm.
and started actually in the production side.
Okay.
And I just fell in love with it. But it was very serendipitous. This was not, I'm going to college to be a doctor. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It was very serendipitous.
That's great. That's a great story. Any of those books still hold up? Any of them you still recommend?
So the president of BBDO at the time was a guy named John Firestone, and he recommended Marshall McLuhan's "The Medium is the Message."
Yeah.
And I think that today, it's one of those books that it's 300 pages, but you could do it in a page. But it's so true.
Yeah.
How you present yourself or how you present the brand, it's really, really important. 3M has a little device they call the paper cutter.
Hmm.
It's like so think of gift wrapping.
Yeah.
And there was this guy, Gabi Sabanje was his name, and he was Middle Eastern, and he just a charming, charming guy. And he talked about the value of wrapping a gift, and how important it is to package it because it tells that other person how important they are.
Mm,
And this was the early days of gift cards. So this is 15 years ago or so, 20
yeah.
years ago. And he goes, we're depersonalizing the importance of telling that person how important they are to you. Because we're just going to Target, getting a $50 gift card, dumping it in a bag and stuffing paper on top and saying, "Aren't you great?" Whereas if you wrap a gift, you take the time to and he was so into it. But I think Marshall McLuhan's "The Medium is the Message." That's what it's all about. It's wherever you show up, how you show up matters. And I think that still holds true today. And the best brands still do it.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a definitely a timeless classic.
Yeah.
And using that story, I'll use that as an opportunity to put a bow on this conversation.
All right. Well played. Well played.
But yeah, thank you so much for those fabulous insights and just explaining the work that you do at CCF. I think it's
Yeah.
going to
Well,
be
thanks
really.
for your time, Harry. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And so for folks to connect, it's ccf-ideas.com, the website.
Correct.
Okay. Anywhere else you want to send folks? We'll have your LinkedIn there in the show notes as well.
Yeah, they can go to our LinkedIn. They can go to Instagram. If anyone wants to send us business, you're welcome to send me an email at rankin@ccf-ideas.com. Yeah, but the website and Instagram and LinkedIn are the best places to take a peek at what we're doing.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks again for
All
your
right.
time, Rob. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care, Harry. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in and making the choice to listen to this podcast. If you liked what you've heard today, please don't forget to subscribe.